there, this is Helen Bellino from Artopia Mosaics and Sculpture. Welcome to our YouTube tutorial, which is all about doing a rendered background instead of a full mosaic background on some of your artworks. So here's a couple of examples of using that technique. Let's go over and have a look at the kit. So let's have a look what's in our kit. So inside you'll find a 1 kilo bag of Sculpt Stick Part A, which you'll make your rendered coating with. You'll find the 5 tints that you chose from our website. There's also a bottle of our amazing mosaic cleaner, which will help you with your cleanup at the end. A mask and some gloves and some literature. You have the instructions for the render alongside this YouTube tutorial. You've got our brochure that goes in with all our Sculpt Stick products. You've got some information about the tints. You've got a fish pattern there, which is just for you to practice doing one of the methods with the render coating, which I will explain later. And you've got a little thank you note which lets you know that 10% of the sales of this product goes to our non-for-profit association, Artopia Angels, and we're currently supporting some very impoverished families in Bali and helping them through these difficult times. So let's get started. First of all, you need to choose your substrate. Here's some examples of suitable substrates. You can use Marmox, which has a cement surface. That's a lightweight substrate. You can use cement sheet, which is a little bit heavier, very versatile and very cheap, so that's a good surface to work on. If you've just got some old tiles, you can use the unglazed surface of the tiles to put a render coat. You can use anything that's made out of terracotta, like terracotta pots and bird baths. You can use anything that's made out of cement, like cement pavers or cement sculptures. This is one of our S&S sculptures that I made myself, so that's also a suitable substrate for this render coat. You can also use canvases, like I have done in this bird and the big bird. Canvases are not normally suitable for mosaic work because they're flexible, and flex and mosaics don't generally work together. But these mosaics are made out of ocean debris, which I collect on the beach, lots of tiny little pieces of plastic. And I do make them on fiberglass mesh beforehand, and then like this, and then I stick them onto the rendered background later. So there's actually no flex in the actual birds. And because they're very lightweight, it's not such an issue to do them on canvas. So canvas can be a suitable, inexpensive option as well if you're doing lightweight things. So you can even repurpose an old canvas like this where you've had a play, or you don't like the artwork, you can just go over it with the rendered coat and start again. Or if you want a better quality one, of course, you can go and buy yourself a good canvas. Make sure your substrates are prepared, and that means they need to be clean and dry and free of dust. So you can give them a little bit of a dust down, and most things are ready to go. With something like this terracotta pot, which I just plucked deliberately out of the garden to show you that it's not ready for its render coat. You need to get rid of all the stuff. You need to give it a good scrub with a scrubbing brush and then leave it in the sun to dry, and then it will be ready for a render coat. So let's get started. Now I'm going to show you how to mix the Sculpt Stick that you can use for your rendered coat. So first of all, you need to put your gloves on. Our Sculpt Stick product is no more toxic than any other cement-based product, which basically means you don't want to breathe in the dust, and it might be a little bit harsh on your hands. So make sure you wear a good dust mask, which we have provided for you. You also need to cover your eyes with your glasses or safety glasses, because you don't want that dust going into your eyes either. It might be irritating. But like I said, it's no more sinister than any other cement-based product. Now this is the measurement. It's 2.5 parts of powder of the part A, which you'll find in this kit, to 1 part water. Now, a part just means anything that you decide to measure with. I've chosen this cup, but you can choose anything you want, a spoon, a scoop, a different type of cup, or whatever. Or you can weigh it. So for 3 parts, so I've just measured out 2.5 parts ready. So there's 1 part, 2 parts, 2.5 parts. That size is a bit small. I'm supposed to fit them into this one. As you can see, we love recycling at Artopia, and I encourage you all to do the same because, you know, we're a bit of environmental crusaders here. Sorry, Mr. Cameraman, he should have a dust mask on as well. And then we add our 1 part water. Now, you can give that a good mix. You can either use a knife, an old knife, you can use a little spatula or a big spatula, you can use a wooden stick. I like using knife myself, but for this one I'm going to use this wooden stick because I've already got colourant all over that knife. It does take a little bit of stirring, and at some stage you might think it's not even starting to mix together, but then all of a sudden it will come good. So our mixture is starting to come together, but do make sure that you get right into the corners in the bottom, because you will find there's still some powder left in there. Once you've got it nicely combined, just let that sit for 5 minutes. You can take your mask off now because it's only when the powder is loose that you need to worry. Now that it's combined, you can't breathe in the particles, so it's perfectly safe. Now that we've let it sit for 5 minutes, we'll give it another stir. If you want to colour your render coat, now's the time that we add the colours. So using your tint colours, you can either colour the whole batch, or you can just take out a little bit in a separate pot and colour that. So I'm going to do that with just a little bit to show you. The colorants are extremely intense, so you do have to be careful that you don't put in too much to start off with. So I'm just going to use this blue tone. First of all, make sure the lid's on properly and give it a shake. Sometimes the liquid and the gel can separate a little bit. Open it up and start with a toothpick. Just pop your toothpick in the bottle and pop it into your mixture, because then you'll just get an idea of how much or how little you need. So you can see just from that little toothpick, I've got quite a lot of colour in there already. It's very, very easy to go a bit crazy on your colour and then end up with a colour that's way too strong. If that happens, you can do one of 2 things. You can either add more, make up more S&S and add more to it to dilute the colour, but then of course you're going to end up with a lot more mixture and you might not need it all. Or you can use our white tint. That's really great if you've gone too much colour, then you can add a bit of white tint to tone it down. So choosing white in your selection of 5 is actually a really good idea. You can actually buy the tints separately or in packs of 5, 10 or 20 on the website as well, if you do want more of a colour range than the 5 that you've chosen for your pack. So that's all ready to go, mixed up now. Okay. Now I have mixed up some colours here to show you some effects. We're going to move on now to the actual methods and the effects you can get with the different colours. So if you look in this pot, you'll see that I've used 2 different colours. That's our sand and our brick. Instead of mixing it fully, I just kind of swirled it around a bit and I got this interesting effect, which I can then apply as a render coat. So you don't actually have to even mix the colorants through fully if you want to do something fancy like that. You can also work with the colorants in a piping, with the render coating in a piping bag. if you want to control it a little bit more. I'm not going to show you how to make these piping bags in this tutorial because there is another tutorial on this YouTube channel showing you how to make a piping bag. So if you're interested in that, have a look. Now we're going to work through the different methods of applying your render coat if you're doing a mosaic. So method one is you make your mosaic on your substrate like we normally do. That's all ready and finished. My mosaic's all finished. And then you put your render coat around it. Now you do have to be a bit careful with this method because obviously you can get the render coat all over your mosaics if you're not careful. So you might like to tape it off with some masking tape. Or you can use the piping bag. So like I said, you've got a bit more control and you can actually pipe the render around the edge. Whoops, my hole's got a bag in it. Bag's got a hole in it. Nothing worse. You can actually pipe your edges like that around so you're not getting it all over your mosaic work, and then maybe you can be a little bit more gung-ho and using a small spatula or an icy pulse stick you can apply the rest. So it is a simple matter of just putting this SNS render coat straight onto your substrate. It's fantastic. You don't need to worry about sealing, you don't need to worry about priming, you just put it straight on. In fact, you know, there is a lot of hoo-ha's around about do I seal or don't I seal. Sometimes sealants can interfere with the adhesion of things. So if I was to put sort of like a PVA-based sealant between this Marmox and my render coat, that would actually be creating a barrier for the gluing rather than assisting it. So you do have to be a little bit careful with doing that sort of thing. So cement base and cement product, perfectly compatible without having to do any work. So you just keep going like that, putting on your render coat until you've completely surrounded your mosaic. So that's method one. Method two is a lot cleaner to work with. So you can see I've done it here with this seahorse. You actually make a template and place it on your substrate, put your render over it, and then you can remove your pattern and you're left with this negative space of your design, which you can then fill with mosaics. So that's actually a cleaner way of working, and some people find that a lot easier. So I'm going to demonstrate that method now. I'm just going to use the fish pattern which you've got in your kit, and you might like to just practice with the fish pattern. Of course you don't have to just do a fish, you can do anything you want. Just make a pattern on a piece of thick paper. I do find paper is better because it is a little bit easier to make it stick down. Decide what colour you want. Maybe I'll do this, start with this blue tone. And what you do, you don't even have to stick it down, just start pushing it across, just making sure that the paper stays flat. You don't have to cover all the paper, you can just do the edges. But if you're doing the whole board, you might like to change colours, get some effects using different colours. That's why it's kind of fun to mix up a few different coloured batches of your SNS render with the different tint colours. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you get the gist. I will just go around the edges of the fish though so you can see how it works. There are different effects you can get with your render, which I'll show you a little bit later on in this tutorial. So that's method two. Now, what you do next is you need to flick up one part of your pattern without causing too much disruption. So I'm just lifting it up with a toothpick and then quickly peel it off. And there we have the negative space there in which you can make a mosaic. You need to wait until your render coat is dry before you make your mosaic, because otherwise it's going to get a bit messy. So that's a great technique. So method 3 is when you will be rendering your whole board, your whole substrate, and then sticking the mosaic on top of your render. So I will show you with this little pattern here. So maybe we'll go for this turquoise. Probably need a bigger applicator. So you do whatever surface you like. And again, I'm going to mix in a few different colours. So I really like that look. And as you sort of using your applicators, you can blend the colours a bit to get some nice effects. You do need to put it on fairly thickly if you want to drop your mosaic straight into the wet render, which you can, because Sculpt Stick is also suitable to use as a fantastic cement-based adhesive. It's probably a little bit thin on the ground there, so what I might do is just pop a little bit of the Sculpt Stick on the back of my prepared mosaic there, which has been made on fiberglass mesh. And then you can just drop it onto your substrate. And with clean hands, which I don't have, I'll just grab a rag. And press it down. And tidy up any splotches that you don't like. So that's a really easy way of doing it. I am going to take my gloves off now because I've got turquoise all over them. So you can also do a partial mosaic in that same method. Just a few bits and pieces to play around with. And I might use the render that I used last night, even though I did this yesterday, because it's been so cold, it hasn't cured yet. So you can see that the two colours are kind of mixed in, but not fully, which I quite like that effect as well. So you would smear it all over your substrate, wherever you weren't going to do a mosaic, and then pressing your pieces straight in if you're doing a partial mosaic, that sort of thing. Or if you're doing a more traditional type of mosaic, you can prepare your pieces cut ready on sticky tape like this. Put down your render coat. I'll just use white this time, so I don't think those colours are going to suit my crazy cat lady. I'll probably just paint it later. So I'll put down a render coat. This is also going to be a partial mosaic. Then you can start taking off your mosaic pieces one at a time. I wouldn't advise dropping the whole thing in on the tape, because when you pull the tape off it might come apart. I've seen them do it on Better Homes and Gardens, but those things don't always work out. No offence. So you can see that I'm building my mosaic one piece at a time, like we love to do. It also means I probably don't have to grout, and that's the beauty of a rendered background and pressing in like this, because the rendered background's coming through the gaps, and then you can just wipe it off with your finger and you've got a grouting effect like that. So I won't continue with that because I'm sure you've got the idea. Now I'd like to show you some different textures and effects you can get in your rendered coat. Because sometimes you want it smooth and sometimes you want to create lumps and bumps and patterns. So first of all, if you are going to do some textured work, you need to put the rendered coating on reasonably thick, so you've got a bit to play around with it with. So put it on, make sure it's nicely adhered to the substrate. I'll just do it roughly for the sake of the demonstration. And now you can start thinking about what textures you want. So there's all sorts of things that you can use to make textures with. Even just that applicator I did made a certain texture that you might like. You can use a brush if you want finer lines. You can go a couple of different ways if you want to create different directions in your render coat. You can use a serrated knife to get that lovely serrated effect. That's quite nice. You can use a fork if you want a more rough texture. If you want to sort of control the lines, you can do it back the other way and create interesting textures like that. I'll just smooth it off again. That's the beauty of it too. You've got quite a bit of working time where you can play around until you're happy with what you've done. Maybe I'll use a toothbrush and do some little roughing it up like that, or I could brush it like this. I could try some things from nature. I've got a bit of sea sponge here from the beach. Let's see what that does. That makes a nice sort of bumpy effect. I've got some little things from the garden. I could make some imprints. If you want to just control it a little bit more with your texture, what you can do is lay out your, put your render coat on and then leave it. This one's been sitting for about half an hour now, and it should be just finger touch dry, which is great because it sort of forms a skin. So that means I can use my gloved finger to smooth it down, or to make some other textures in if I want to sort of make, if I don't want those things that I'm making texture with to stick, I can actually get a little bit more control over it, and they won't stick as much. So I can actually make imprints and get some other types of effects if I want some particular designs that are not going to get all sort of gooey when I pull it out. So that's a good way of doing it if you want to sort of control it a little bit more. Now sometimes you actually just want it smooth, and this is how you get it completely smooth. I'll use this one as an example. Get yourself a piece of plastic that doesn't have any creases in it. Place it on top of your render coat and then press it and smooth it with your fingers. And smooth out all those lumps and bumps. You have to leave that then till it's dry. So I did this one last night. I did it the same way, and now I'm going to peel it off. And you can see I've got this beautiful, beautiful smooth surface. I deliberately left some craters there because this is actually my favourite look in the rendered background. It sort of looks like an ancient wall, which I really like. The other thing you can do is you can use a crinkled piece of plastic for another type of effect. So deliberately put some creases into it. You don't forget to get recycled plastic, which we have plenty of soft plastics that we can recycle. So a crinkle effect, put it on there, and again leave it to dry. And I did this one last night, and I'm pulling off the crinkle of plastic, and I've got this beautiful effect. So fantastic scope to do all sorts of textures. Just your imagination is the limit. So have a play and enjoy it. And think about what will suit the mosaics that are inside this rendered background. Once your rendered coat is dry, if you don't like the colour, or if you haven't coloured it, then you can really easily change the colour. There's two techniques to do it. You can just use paint, or you can make a slurry. A slurry is a really watered down version of Sculpt Stick. So we put a little bit of Sculpt Stick and add water. Mix it up. And what you'll end up with is a runny sort of cream consistency. Slurry is great because it does stick really well to the surface because it's compatible with the other surface. Then you can add the colorants. I've got a little bit of blue on this stick, which I'll mix in. That's our blue tint. Using a paintbrush then, give it a bit more of a stir, and then use that to colour your surface. It's a really nice effect in this crinkly section, isn't it? Because it's pooling in the cracks, so it's giving you quite a nice dimension with the colour there. You can even wipe it back if you want to create a bit more of an effect. Which again gives you a bit of a two-tone effect. So using a slurry is a great way of doing it. The other way that you can change the colour is just by painting this rendered surface once it's dry. So you can use any type of paint. Here's some acrylic paints, which are fine for indoors. If you want to put it outside, then you'll need to get some exterior grade paints. The beauty thing about having our artistic tints is you don't need to buy many paint colours. You can just buy either a white base or a deep base, and then you can add the artistic tints to make your colours. So this one is just white paint with a bit of the blue tint added to it. And this one this is white paint here, and I'm going to add a little bit of orange. So it's easy as that, just to change the colours of your paint. So all I had is this one bottle of paint. So then you can do different effects. You can just paint it and change the colour, which is what I did on my big Great White Egret canvas. I actually did the Sculpt Stick render, and then I got my paints and I worked like that. You can also rub it back, maybe if you want to get some effects where the colours meld together, which is a terrific and interesting look. So you can really play around with your paints as well. So that's very easy, just to change the colours, add colour, paint onto that surface, paint designs, or do whatever you want. So as you can see, working with these this Sculpt Stick render coat is just a fantastic and versatile way of mixing it up a little bit with your mosaics and trying different things. So go for it. Now we'd really like to see the things that you make with this S&S product and your rendered backgrounds or your partial mosaics. So please join our Facebook site. We have a community group. It's called Artopia Community Group, and then we have our Artopia Mosaics and Sculpture Facebook site. So if you are on Facebook, please join those groups, and you can post your work, and we'd love to see what you do. So good luck, have fun, and the sky's the limit.